All right. Let me welcome you to the Tuesday, March 17, 2009, joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. Mr. City Clerk, could you call the roll?
Council members Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Draymond.
Here.
Roll for the agency, please.
Agency members Draymond.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Chairman Najarian.
Here.
All right. And could we hear your report, please, Mr. Kasakian?
The agenda for the March 17, 2009 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, March 12, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you very much. And could we also hear the item at 1?
At 1 is a public hearing, Director of Planning, regarding amendments to the Downtown Specific Plan. At 1A is Council Resolution adopting General Plan Amendment 2008-003 and amending the Downtown Specific Plan DSPA. At B is Council Resolution adopting General Plan Amendment 2008-004, amending the land use element of the general plan in connection with the amendments to the Downtown Specific Plan. At C is an ordinance for introduction to adopt zoning code text amendment related to the proposed DSPA overlay zone. And at D is an ordinance for introduction amending the zoning map to reflect new zoning designations related to zone change PZON 2008-007, creating an overlay to the Downtown Specific Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Mr. Loomis.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, excuse me 1 second.
Just one. First two are council resolutions. The ordinance.
Let's take care of that housekeeping. You're quite right, Mr. Weaver, and that's what we normally do. Item 1A, that's obviously council resolution, and so is 1B. And then you would take us from there, Mr.
CMD.
Garcia?
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, members of council, items 1C and 1D are council ordinances, so they're up for introduction at today's meeting.
Okay, they're council. Okay.
All right. Very good. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Loomis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and agency. This relates to the amendments to the Downtown Specific Plan. The Downtown Specific Plan was adopted in November.
Mr. Loomis, before you go into the adopted by, let me just sneak the words in here that I am so famous for forgetting, which is I'd like to open the public hearing. All right, carry on.
Thank you. As I was saying, the Downtown Specific Plan was adopted in 2006, and last year in 2007, the council and agency held 3 different study sessions to discuss possible amendments to the specific plan. At the conclusion of those study sessions in October, the council directed staff to prepare a series of amendments related to specific items. So the resolutions and ordinances in front of you today are the necessary tools to implement those amendments that you discussed. So I will go over them very briefly, and the slides are actually to illustrate the final one, which is the only item we've received any public comment on. First of all, there are some minor text amendments to the specific plan itself that are being proposed. Some of these relate to consistency between the zoning code and the specific plan in terms of land use definitions. There are 2 items that actually slightly modify the policies of the specific plan. One relates to parking and valet operations and how that's approved. It's in the proposed amendments that would come to the City Council for approval if somebody proposed valet parking plan within their project. The second relates to the arts requirement. There is a public art requirement in the specific plan. As adopted, the Arts and Culture Commission is the approval body. We're proposing to modify that so that the Arts and Culture Commission is a recommending body with the City Council as the final approval body. So the Council will see the art component as part of approving the entire project. The second amendment relates to providing bonuses or incentives to encourage art gallery type uses to come to the downtown. There are 2 different incentives for that. One is a height and density bonus that's provided to new projects, which would be an additional floor and square footage equal to the gallery space. The second would apply to existing buildings, in which they would, if an existing building converts to an arts use, they would not be required to provide additional parking. As it relates to the height bonus, that would be implemented through a development agreement so that the proposed art gallery or arts museum space would be required to enter into a development agreement with the City Council dictating kind of the terms and operating plan for the business that would be good for a minimum of 5 years. That would ensure that we would actually see that arts use there for an extended period of time. The third amendment relates to the Alex Theater District. The Alex Theater District is the mid-brand area between Wilson and Lexington. As under the adopted downtown specific plan, the height limit there is restricted to a maximum of 3 stories. The council asked us to consider raising that height limit on the northern half of the Alex Theater District, which is between California and Lexington, to 6 stories at a maximum. That makes it consistent with the surrounding districts. The Fourth Amendment relates to the review authority for projects in the downtown specific plan, and more directly to projects that are both inside the downtown specific plan and outside the downtown specific plan, projects that would straddle 2 different zones. Under the current zoning ordinance, it's actually ambiguous as to who is the review authority. Is it the City Council and the Design Review Board, City Council and the Zoning Administrator? We've proposed changing amendments to the zoning ordinance that would clarify that any project that's partially in and partially out of the downtown specific plan or the redevelopment areas would come to the City Council for design review, variances, and any conditional use permits. I'll note that this also will apply to the San Fernando Road corridor area. And then finally, which needs to be illustrated with the map, the council asked us to look at creating a procedure so that projects that are inside the downtown specific plan and partially outside of the downtown specific plan along Elk Avenue is illustrated here in the map of downtown. These would be properties that are located both in the orange area and that yellow area. Just to zoom in, the request was for properties that are located at least 50% inside the orange area within the existing downtown specific plan boundaries, but might include properties or parcels outside of the specific plan on Elk Avenue, which is illustrated in the yellow, that the specific plan standards could apply to the entire project. The area in the yellow is currently zoned for multifamily use, which limits the height to 3 stories and pretty tightly to multifamily residential uses. In the specific plan, the height limits could go up to 6 stories, depending on which side of the map you're on, and allows for any kind of mixed-use activity. It could be retail, could be commercial, hotel, as well as multifamily. So we have proposed to implement that at what we're calling a downtown specific plan overlay zone. That would actually be an amendment to the zoning map and the zoning ordinance. And the DSPA overlay zone, as it's been termed, would apply to only those 2 blocks as illustrated in yellow. And is sort of described to say that if 50% of the project is located in the downtown specific plan, then the downtown specific plan standards would apply to the entire project. As I noted, this is the subject where we received a few phone calls, mostly from residents or property owners near or on Elk who have requested some clarification as to what this is about. A few people have spoken on this issue at Planning Commission and expressed some concerns about this. The Planning Commission, although they recommended approval of the entire package of amendments, did suggest that it may be prudent to consider whether these 2 blocks should just be included within the specific plan entirely. If the council has an interest in considering that recommendation, the Planning Department at this point would recommend not adopting the overlay zone or introducing the overlay zone so that we can spend some more time talking to property owners on the street to ascertain their opinions. So that is the full package, very briefly, of what of the downtown specific plan amendments, and be happy to answer any questions if there are any, as well as the other staff who worked on this.
Thank you, Mr. Loomis. All right, we do have a number of cards, so to my colleagues, let me give you the opportunity to weigh in or ask questions now, but please keep in mind we do have some speakers. Mr. Yusefi.
One question. You talked about the art part, that it goes to arts and culture and then comes to council.
Correct.
Since this council has moved in a direction of maybe creating a nonprofit and doing away with the Arts Commission. Would the natural or secondary location be the Planning Commission?
I think at the time, if and when the Arts Commission is disbanded, we would be one of the questions we would have to ask. What would be the appropriate commission?
So you do not have a recommendation
At
for
this
that?
point, we do not have a recommendation.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other questions or input before the public? All right. Let's go to our speakers. Our first speaker is Herbert Milano, followed by Father Jim Bavacqua.
Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council, my name is Herbert Milano. I have some familiarity with the downtown specific plan, inasmuch as I've attended practically all of the meetings. And as you are all very well aware, I was the one who filed a lawsuit against the environmental impact report for the downtown specific plan. I actually don't know if I should be combining all of my comments in one, but I have the following things concerning items 1A and 1B. First of all, I'm in support of the intent of this amendment, and I want to say that there are a few things that concern me about the artwork and what can happen in the future. It wasn't too long ago, a few months ago, when we had the artwork that was in front of the California Pizza Kitchen removed. And I was wondering whether that particular signature artwork that was copied so many times as an example of Glendale's proposal towards art, whether that building was ever given, variances for additional height due to the artwork that they put on. But we lost that artwork fairly quickly without much, and I was here when it was proposed by the new owners of that building. So I was wondering if the same thing can happen in the future, and what assurances could we have that artwork that is then created where high density is given, then is removed summarily, 10 years later. The second question that I have has to do with the area that is in front of the Holy Family Church, where today is the Armory. I always thought that area in front of the Catholic Church would be an ideal place to have open space and lead an open area towards Central Park. If these high densities change the nature of the area in front of the church, then we lose an opportunity to open up this particular signature building to the center of town. And the last item that I have of concern has to do with the Alex Theater and the height changes that occur to the north of it. I would recommend that instead we have the height changes towards the east side of it, so that it still allows that spire or the spear in front of the theater to be visible. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but nonetheless. So having the height, increased high density, but towards the east side, towards the later, the back end of the block, so that at least the front's still visible for that signature piece of historical signature that we have here. So those are my concerns, because then from the north side of the street, you would not be able to see that signature piece if the heights are actually changed on the north side of Alex Theater. Anyway, I have other concerns concerning parts C and D. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Milano. Father Jim Bavacqua, followed by Mike Agabeg.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Father Jim Bavacqua, and I'm currently the administrator pastor at Holy Family in Glendale. And although I'll be the first to admit I haven't done a lot of research about this whole overlay, what concerns me is I'm not sure if it's been considered that the overlay borders our Holy Family grade school. It's a narrow street. There's a lot of kids, 315 kids attend the grade school, and so there's already a traffic density that is pretty unwieldy at times. And if we, with this overlay, allow 5-story buildings or whatever we're talking about doing, that it would just enhance the traffic bordering a grade school with a lot of kids getting in and out of cars. If we were to reroute the kids on Lomita, we've already got a problem on Lomita, and we have a high school on Lomita as well. So it concerns me primarily is the safety issues of the children, and already we have a traffic problem, so traffic would be up there after safety. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Father. All right, Mike, could you help me with the pronunciation? Agabig. Okay. Followed by Bill Evans. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Mike Agabig, and I own a property in the East Elk strip, the yellow strip there, which is on either side of Brand, which was originally outside of the DSP plan. I own property there, and I appeared at the February 18 meeting and expressed some concerns. At that time, it was indicated to the membership then that you could conceivably have buildings that are as high as 7 stories right next to multi-residential 2- and 3-story buildings, only 5 feet away. That's the clearance between the two. So the property on the south side of Colorado would have a 5 feet clearance to the property on the north side of Elk, which is totally different zone. And the idea was advanced that perhaps these 2 yellow strips, which were, for whatever reason, excluded from the DSP plan, could be included, and thereby eliminating this problem of high and low and different zoning issues. I subsequently also discussed this matter with Mr. Loomis for further clarification, because it was indicated that well, maybe we should go and talk to the owners of properties in these 2 yellow strips of land, which just visually looks to be out of order. You know, it's just, I don't know why it was excluded, but whatever the reason, and see if they have an interest to be included. Well, I have to tell you that it took me quite a while to understand the ramification of that, because as that was explained to me, even if you are included, the zone in these yellow strips would not change. So conceivably, you could still have a building behind you that could be 5 stories, but as high as a 7-story building, only 5 feet away. And then there is another problem, and that is that if the property on the south side of Colorado was to purchase your property on the north side, may I continue?
If you could conclude, actually. I
appreciate it. Then they could include your property in their zoning, but you couldn't do the vice versa. And this causes problems with intimidation, because if you don't sell, they can box you in. They can buy properties on either side and box you in. And in a way of a suggestion, one idea is to, if that is the case, to at least allow a distance more than 5 feet between the properties, so you don't have this problem of being boxed in and elimination of air and sunshine.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We'll see if we can get some discussion for you on that.
Where is your property again?
My property would be on the right side between Glendale Avenue and Louise, right there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Our last card is from Bill Evans.
Good afternoon, Mayor,
Afternoon.
Council. I'm here also to speak on the part on Elk, that when I talked to the Planning Commission, we didn't get the initial paperwork on this. It went to the Chancery office in L.A. By the time we got it, the hearings were over and everything. But when I called and talked to Alan and asked him if the school had been taken into consideration for 309 children that are dropped off there, he said no, it hadn't. That's going to cause a real problem. And any more traffic that comes in now, if you go up to Glendale Avenue on Elk, you can't make a left-hand turn safely on to Glendale Avenue. There's too much traffic. You can only either make a right-hand turn, or the people have to turn around and come back down to Louise and then go up to Colorado. And like Father said, that on the property over on Lameda, the city presently is going to put a strip out there because since the Americano has opened and they put a light at Lameda and Brand, everybody uses that as a shortcut now. They either take and go all the way up Lameda and out onto Glendale Avenue where there's a light, or they come up to Louise, make a left-hand turn, and go up to Colorado. So the traffic has really increased tenfold. 3 weeks ago, we had a young man that was hit on a bike at the corner of Louise and Lameda, and we're really concerned about that. The police department has been great. They've had their officers down there writing tickets for people blowing the stop sign for speeding and everything else. So the police department has done a great job. But that's what my real concern is, the safety of the children. I don't have any questions. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you very much. All right. That is my last speaker card. I will close the public hearing. Mr. Weaver.
I have a couple questions, Mr. Loomis. The orange and the yellow, they're two separate zones right now?
That's correct. The orange is in the downtown specific plan. The yellow is one of our multifamily zones.
So we could change the zoning in the yellow.
Correct.
And it now being outside of the downtown specific plan, what would be the review process for any development occurring in the yellow zones? Zoning administrator, planning commission, what?
Design review would go to the design review board. Variances and CUPs would be heard by the zoning administrator with appeals to the planning commission.
And if it was made orange, that would all come to the council?
Correct.
Thank you.
If I may, just clarification, assuming the project was in the original orange area. So if the project was within the original boundary of the downtown specific plan and on Elk, the whole project would come to the council. If it was only on Elk, it would go to the design review board.
But if we moved it, then wouldn't it all be in the downtown specific plan and all come to us?
The current proposal is to establish an overlay zone, and so only if the project is half in and half out.
If we decided to rezone it, you'd come back later.
If you decided to include it within the downtown specific plan, we'd come back later, and then everything would go to the council. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I'll start with this particular issue. I would not like to include the yellow zone in the DSP. Starting from the west, when you look at Columbus and Colorado, that portion of the corner, the southern corner there, the southwestern corner, I think that's a corridor that does belong in the downtown. It's literally across the street from the Galleria. You cross Central, I think that belongs in the downtown, all the way to Elk. As you cross Brand, continues to be part of what I perceive as a downtown environment. However, when you get over to Elk, the southern portion of, the northern portion of Elk, then I just absolutely don't think that should be included. I mean, those are multifamily neighborhoods. There's an existing school there and has been there for an awful long time and is going to continue. And I just don't see that being included at all. I think Glendale Avenue, where it touches Elk, that's a different story. And so I'm for leaving those multifamily residential. There might even be a couple of single-family homes there, I'm not sure. There certainly are across the street on Elk. I just think it's taking the downtown way too far. We want to try to concentrate our development in areas that are easily reachable by bus and so forth. So I'm not for that at all.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Najarian.
I would have to agree that I'm not in favor of extending the downtown specific plan to those areas in the yellow. It is a very heavily impacted neighborhood just south of Elk, and I don't think it would be fair to permit the height and the the uses that we're permitting in the DSP.
I just wanted a question when you were done.
Oh,
Or you, just both yellow areas, or just,
both yellow areas, yeah, referring to both yellow areas. And that's consistent with my concern for those neighborhoods that are west, on the west boundary of Central. At some point, we were talking about increasing those densities as well, and my concern at that point was the adjacent neighborhoods. And even though that's not the issue before us, the reasoning that I have holds the same, that I think we do need to lessen the impact of the downtown uses and the downtown intensity and density on those neighborhoods, especially, and we heard from the school, Holy Family School there with so many children, many other apartment buildings down there. So I would not be in favor of doing that. The bonus for the museums and arts uses for an existing building, Alan, is that they won't have to provide the additional parking that would be needed for that type of use.
That's correct, if there were additional parking.
But we do have that parking waiver fee, do we not? Did we not pass that some time ago? So even if
referring to the in lieu fee, no, that hasn't been brought back to the council yet.
Oh, that hasn't been brought. That was just a discussion.
Right.
Okay, I thought that was another alternative towards relieving the parking requirement. In any event, I'm okay with that, giving the arts and museum use a bonus, a parking bonus, if you will. I think everything else seems to be pretty much clean up. I have no problem with the review authority to come to council. So those are my points. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Najarian. Mr. Yusefian.
As I asked earlier, with the arts, I would like to change that to the Planning Commission, to be honest with you, because I know it's just a matter of time before that one happens. Might as well just do it once and for all. The second item is the yellow section on between Louise and Glendale Avenue. I'm not for changing that. Let me remind my colleagues, we actually built an affordable housing on Elk not too long ago, and I don't see anybody going out there tearing those out, so I like to keep it residential in that section. On the other section, I'm more in tune with Mr. Quintero. I think that is right across from Galleria and the Galleria parking, so I am more enamored to stay with that. I'm fine with that. The other thing is there was a talk about the Armory. I'd like the public to know the Armory belongs to the city of Glendale, so it's ours. I do not anticipate a 7-story building there. If there is, I think the city will have to deal with it. Number one. Number two, how many more years we have on that lease? Another 20? Yeah, I think because Sheldon wasn't here when we signed that lease, which was 30 years. I think that's been almost 10 years.
I wasn't here at the time.
Yeah.
My recollection is we had 30 years on the extension.
Right.
That happened shortly before I came, so we're probably 15 to 20 years more.
Right. So we have another 20 years. So I don't think you have to worry about that Armory changing for another 20 years. It will probably stay the same. That's why the color in the colored version is the same as the Civic Center, which is in here. It belongs to the city, so it's zoned for civic, and the same thing for the lot above it, which is the adult recreation. That's also city property. So those are my comments. I'm fine with the rest of it.
Okay. Mr. Quinter.
I just want to be sure you understand that I'm not into upzoning the yellow portion next to Columbus, right?
In other words, you don't, Mr. Quintero, you don't want that to become an overlay zone either.
No.
Okay, so what you're saying is you agree with Mr.
Because I thought you said you wanted because it was by
No, absolutely not. Columbus and Elk, absolutely not.
Okay, so you're in agreement with Mr. Najarian to make those overlay zones.
Right.
Okay.
And that's fine. Then I'll be consistent with that.
Mr. Weaver.
It's not a hill I want to die on.
Okay, I disagree with all my colleagues.
Well, wait a minute. I haven't had a chance to
Well,
speak, so you
that
don't know
have
if you
spoken.
disagree with me.
That have spoken. The way I look at it, Colorado is a very busy east-west street, one of our major streets in the city. I'm looking to create a buffer zone between that busy street and Elk, which borders on the schools. I know about the traffic. I've met with some of the people in the parish down there, and they're putting together a petition to ask the city to do something about the near misses on Louise and Elk. They're having big problems down there. That's a separate issue. But I think if it's all orange, if it's all in the downtown specific plan, most likely what you're going to see in the future is developers, whatever, coming in, and they're going to want larger parcels of land to develop. Like the distance between Elk and Colorado is about the same distance as from Brand to Central. You can visualize that. Any developer today is going to want a bigger parcel to develop on. With that in mind, and knowing it comes to the council for design review, whatever, we can control how that parcel is configured. Creating the buffer of putting the higher buildings facing on Colorado with traffic ingress and egress off of Colorado and having it step down to the residential and the school area to the south, rather than having a straight line. Yes, I know what's in there today, apartments, whatever, but are they going to be there in 30 years? Is somebody come along and going to say, if I could have that whole area, I could really put in something that would be great for the public, whether it be mixed use or whatever. But when you segment it into the little blocks like that, you're not going to get near what you want. So I'm looking for that buffer zone created along Colorado and stepping it down. Traffic, that's the first I've heard they're starting to use it as a cut-through. That's a whole different thing on a traffic analysis. Can't say how we would handle that at this time, but I can understand if I was sitting north on Central, where I'd want to cut through there, then go up to Colorado and face that traffic. So that's my thinking on it. I'm going to lose on it. I already can count to 3, but I think that's the better way to go if you're trying to master plan this part of town for the next 50 years.
Mr. Weaver, may I ask you for clarification, because you may drag along some company as your view may indeed not carry the day, but to the extent you may drag another council member along with you, could you please, just for clarification, point on that up there as to where you would see that reallocated, if you will?
Both yellow areas into orange, part of the downtown specific plan, so council can control any development in that block in the future, recognizing Colorado should be the buffer line with a higher rise if it's 4 or 5 stories,
so that's
stepping down to a couple.
That's how you suggest that be handled. Okay.
Yeah, with the traffic handling off of Colorado, and any council in the future could control that the ingress and egress would not occur off of Elk.
Right. Okay. Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Alan, I may need you to step in here, but there's actually 2 issues here. One is whether you wanted to create the overlay zone in those yellow areas, and 2, whether you wanted to create the process for, regardless of whether or not you've created that overlay zone, if you want to have the council and or the agency be the lead decision maker on those projects. So those are really 2 separate issues. So even if the council's not willing to go forward on making those 2 yellow areas overlay zones, you can still amend the code to basically make either the city council and or the agency the decision maker, so that it doesn't have to go through different zoning administrator design review. So those are 2 separate issues.
So the only difference between my idea would be it's the same zone, or it'd be different zones.
Well, there's 2 ways to accomplish it. One was, which you suggest, I think, was just to make all those areas part of the DSP. Another way is to leave them as they are, but provide that if they're a project that straddles the DSP zone and the non-DSP zone, those decisions still come to the city council rather than having to go to the design review board. And
it would be governed by
Right.
The downtown specific plan, or the orange, would govern if it lapped over.
Well,
Projects in the orange area are within the downtown specific
Right.
plan would be subject to
So
those
if it laps
standards.
over zone,
The DSP overlay zone provides that if you lap over into the
Then it's
multifamily,
all-
DSP standards go with that. And then there's the separate issue that it could be that there are projects that are lap over. If the DSP overlay zone is not adopted,
I don't think that's as clean as,
those could come to the council.
but
Do you
that's
want to
just,
add anything into
that's
that?
just my opinion.
Actually, as part of the overall package, it is one of our first recommendation that you allow us to bring, when a project straggles between the two areas, that you allow us to bypass the zoning administrator and the design review board if a project is part in the DSP already, and bring you the project for council review, because that way we're streamlining the process. However, in those cases where the remaining zoning designation remains, the project would be subject to the zoning regulations of that zone where it is in that zone, but the rest of it would be subject to DSP. It's not impossible to do, but the only cleanup that we would do is that we would bring the whole package in front of you without changing the zoning standards.
You're just tying the hands of any developer when he sits down with his architect and tries to lay it out. He's in one zone, he's having to do certain things in that zone and jumps across to the other.
That's accurate.
That doesn't work for me.
Mr. Quintero.
Okay, well, I don't have a problem with that concept. I think that works. The only thing I don't want to do is to intensify the use in that zone.
Absolutely
So you
not.
can have an intense use facing Colorado, but a much more low-keyed use in the current portion.
And council would
So,
control
Mr.
that.
So, Mr. Hagani, you hear two differing views to accomplish the same task.
Yes.
And you hear it
Number one, Councilman number one.
and Councilmember number 2. So again,
Which
how would
door do you?
what would be your recommendation as to accommodate both of those?
Well, our original
In other words,
recommendation.
each of my colleagues here have a different colored crayon. One wants to color the one area yellow, the other wants to color all of it orange. So, being Solomon, what would you do?
With all due respect, staff's original recommendation to put the boundaries of the DSP where they are today was exactly to protect the existing residential neighborhood south of downtown from encroachment of larger developments from downtown. The only reason why the overlay zoning idea was entertained at the direction of the council was that there were people who came to public hearings in the past and made a request of the city council to consider that because they were interested in combining parcels within the DSP with parcels outside the DSP, and they wanted to take advantage of the standards of the DSP. I must say, staff still maintains that the boundaries of the DSP are probably sound where they are. However, if you'd like to open up that possibility, this would be an option.
All right.
Well, what does staff know? Thank you, Hassan.
Mr. Najarian.
I just want to comment. It's not just the design of the buildings and the size of the lots. It's also the types of uses, I think, that are important that we look at. And being included in going from a multifamily residential to what would otherwise be the East Broadway, is that correct? The East Broadway zone?
Yes.
Gives you a whole range of additional commercial retail uses that I think would really destroy the nature of those already heavily impacted multifamily residences there.
More permissive.
Anything, Mr. Yuseki?
I actually agree with Dave to an extent, but I do agree to a point that the change of use may be of an issue. Also, at this point, I think we have enough properties that are available in the downtown specific plan that can turn over and accommodate mixed-use projects that I really don't feel that I have to go out there and make those changes. Maybe a few years down the road when everything else has developed and there isn't really any option and I don't see anybody knocking at my door saying, gee, I own these properties, I have to build this thing. So that may focus the developers into the locations that the council's desire is to spur development rather than starting to expand the site and kind of get people all over the place. But at this point, if somebody owns one of those properties and the property straddles the two sites, so what will happen is, what happens to a scenario like that? Let's say I own the corner on Columbus. I own 3 lots on Colorado, 3 lots on Columbus. On the street down below it. Elk by Columbus. How would my project be entitled? Explain to me the entitlement process.
Yeah. Under the current proposal, if the project was combining those lots as you described, they would come to the council. As it presently stands, it's between the DRB and the council.
If we don't take the yellow, let's say we're saying we don't want the yellow, what happens?
Well, as Mr. Garcia pointed out, what's shown in the yellow is the proposed overlay zone that would allow the uses and the design standards of the downtown specific plan to come into the yellow area onto Elk. That's one issue. The other proposal is to consolidate the review authority, so any project that is partially in the DSP, any portion of it partially within the DSP, whether it's on Elk or along Central or somewhere else, all of that would come to the council.
Okay.
That's the second proposal.
So if somebody just decides to develop on yellow alone,
then it would go to the design review board and the zoning administrator.
We'd never see it except
Okay.
on appeal.
so we won't see it.
Correct.
But if it's on the orange color, but it has a part of it into the yellow section, then it comes to us.
That's correct.
Okay.
Under the current proposal.
Okay.
But the other question is, and he asked that question, I don't think he got his answer, what, under the current situation, never mind who it comes in front of, what would be built on Colorado, what could be built on Colorado, what could be built on Elk? That's the question. What impact currently
The use.
will that zoning, that use have on the residents of Elk, whether they're around Columbus or they're around Glendale Avenue?
Everything shown in orange on the map is within the downtown specific plan today, and that allows for a wide range of mixed-use opportunities, commercial, retail, hotels, and multifamily. So that's what would be allowed today.
And on Elk?
And on Elk, that's limited to multifamily.
Right. And that's, to me, I personally think that's the way I would want to keep it. If a new project comes in, they own both parcels, a parcel from Colorado to Elk, they can do whatever they need to do under the DSP facing Colorado, but facing Elk, I'm for a multifamily situation, not commercial or the other things that are allowed under the DSP.
Mr. Hagani. Whoa. Mr. Hagani.
If I may just give an example. Let's say you get a project that, if you adopt all of the proposed changes today except for the overlay zoning district, then if you get a project that's part in the DSP and part south of the DSP area on Elk, and if the project applicant wants to perhaps extend some of the uses of the DSP into the property, but is willing to meet the code standards of setbacks and height, etc., on the Elk, according to the multifamily, they would likely be required to apply for variances. However, with the package that we are proposing, we would be authorized to package it all together, everything including the variances and the design review part of it, and bring it directly to City Council and bypass the zoning administrator and the design review.
Right.
So, in other words, people will still be able to apply for variances, but they'd have to come to council.
All right, Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, son, if I'm right, the current zoning would permit 4 stories in the 2 yellow zones.
They're 2 different.
The orange and yellow, according to what I have in here, the incentives to 6. So what I'm, in my own mind, I'm looking if I can build 4 stories I wouldn't build it over the whole area if I could do incentives to get it to 6 fronting on a street like Colorado. I might be able to come down to 1 or 2 on the other. I might make open space, greenery, whatever, to get the incentives to get the 6 stories fronting on Colorado, which also would be a noise buffer down into the area. I mean, there'd be different ways an architect would play with it that would have to have the approval of the council to make it compatible with the residential on the south side of Elk, along with the school and the church. Is that about right?
That is one argument we have heard. And I must say, though, that for the most part, what we get is people who are interested in maximizing and maybe increasing the densities and the intensities in the surrounding areas. That is usually that's the best incentive for developers, to try to get more out of a piece of land.
But we can control that.
That's right. You can control it at any point, yes.
All right. Any other comment? Mr. Yusefian.
Do we have the language here to accomplish what you recommended, which is if we do not change the yellow zoning, we leave the zoning as is, which means the orange stays where it is. Project straddles over 2 of them. So do we have the language in here that we can adopt today that you will be able to package all of them and bring it to us?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want. I'll be fine with that.
Yes, please, Mr. Hagani.
If I may, one more comment that was given by the Councilman Yusefian regarding the recommendation from the Arts and Culture Commission being given to the Planning Commission. If you would like to make a change, I recommend changing it to the Arts and Culture Commission or any other body as designated by the City Council. That way you have the authority to change that at any given any time in the future without having to amend the downtown specific plan if you decide that a different body is qualified to give recommendations to you.
I'm seeing nodding from Mr. Yusefian as though that would satisfy his concern. Mr. Najarian.
I need to clarify Mr. Yusefian's question when he talked about a project straddling the zones. I bought a lot in the multifamily zone in yellow, and I also bought the lot in the transitional zone on Colorado. Then I could, at the discretion of council, I could create a project that would conform to the transitional zoning?
Well,
with using both lots on a project that encompassed both?
If you came as an applicant with such a proposal to us, we would first tell you that you're subject to the zoning standards for the portion that's outside the DSP. You'd be subject to the zoning standards in that portion according to the code. If you propose something different than what the zoning code allows you to do, then we would say they would have to apply for a number of variances depending on what the requests were. And those variances and everything else would be packaged together, bundled together, and presented to the City Council for your review. You might consider those variances worthwhile.
Okay, so the only thing different then is the review body. It's a one-stop shop.
That's right.
In front of us. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I knew that if I sat here long enough, every note on my page
would be
either answered or addressed.
No comment.
My concern early on had been about the options to picking up the line and moving it, not so much because of anything other than causing owners of existing properties that are split, not, I don't know what other word to use, but not the speculative aspect, but those who already own parcels that are split, to have the option to have their projects considered, their properties can be considered as one property or one project. And I think we have addressed that, at least with a process. If it is 50%, then there's an opportunity to have those considered to be taken as one property or project. Correct?
Actually, in terms of the review authority being given to the City Council, it doesn't even have to be 50%. Right. We can always bundle them up, even if a small portion is in the DSP.
Right. But with some discretionary overview, there is an opportunity.
Yes.
Okay. By the way, and just so we are clear, I think the artwork that we're talking about, or that was mentioned, was at City Center 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was not removed. It was moved. And it is still on the site. You might not like where it is. I'm not sure I do either. But it is still there. It hasn't been done away with. It came to the agency, and we approved their moving those pieces. Some are up by the escalators and elsewhere. And I think part of the theory was that it could actually be viewed by someone now who's actually coming and going from the building. And in addition to that, they introduced a new element, which was an improved a water feature, or some may consider it an improved water feature. Let me put it that way.
Which is not built yet.
Well, there's that as well. But I'm talking about the water feature itself is considerably different now than it was. In any case, I'm just trying to think if there are any other notes that I made that have not been addressed, and I think there are none. All right.
You know what?
Mr.
I actually
Quintero.
have a question. One of the speakers mentioned that in talking to Mr. Loomis, that if you are a property owner, and let's call it the yellow zone, that somehow you have restricted rights rather than you're a property owner in the orange zone.
The yellow zone is for the immediate loading and unloading of passengers only.
What did he mean by that? Is he correct, or what was he referring
I believe he may be referring to the fact that in the yellow zone, that's a multifamily zone restricted to 3 stories and multifamily uses, versus the orange zone, which is part of the downtown specific plan, which allows up to 5 stories and
Right,
wider
but
range
a
of
property owner in the yellow zone that purchases a property on the orange zone can do the same thing as someone who has an orange zone property and purchases a yellow zone, correct? I mean, either way, you're a property owner.
I may. It's a little tricky because if a person wants to encroach from the yellow zone into the DSP, they're actually, if they want to build the same lower density and lower height level, they can do that. There's nothing to prevent them. The opposite would not be allowed.
Right, okay. Yes, that's the way I thought it was.
Okay. Mr. Weaver.
Just want to say one thing. I'll vote for what's going to be moved because obviously there's too much good changes in what we're talking about to hold up on this, even though I don't agree with my colleagues on it. So just want you to understand, I'll go along with it, much like I had to do on the adult recreation.
Mr. Yusefian.
So, Mr. Mayor, how do we go about it, City Attorney?
Well, it is 1A and B together as a...
If I may, Mr.
Please.
Mayor, Councilmember Yusefian, actually, items 1A and 1B also reference the overlay zone, which the council is not going in that direction. What my recommendation would be to introduce 1C and 1D individually with the suggested changes, removing the overlay zone on the standards and the uses, as well as the language that Councilmember Yusefian wants with respect to the Arts and Culture Commission, either being the Arts and Culture Commission or the commission designated by City Council. And then we will bring back resolutions 1A and 1B when the ordinances come back for adoption.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to introduce the ordinances on 1C and D as modified and amended.
We didn't do them separate.
Oh.
It was what Mr. Garcia was just saying.
Yeah, but you're just introducing ordinances, right?
That's correct. I just prefer to have it done.
Yeah, okay. I will introduce the ordinance.
Everybody's a critic, you know.
I know. Cannot tell you. Can't get anything right. 1C, I will introduce the ordinance on 1C as modified by the city attorney. And I'll introduce the ordinance in 1D as modified by the city attorney.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are you happy now?
Absolutely.
All right. All right. We have a... they have been introduced. Let's put it that way. All right. Mr. Garcia, did you have anything
those
to add?
items will come back at the regular meeting next week.
Do we have another public hearing?
No.
No. But we do have another item.
Oh, I mean, when it comes back.
Oh, yes.
It's a regular meeting of the City Council next week at 6 p.m.
Okay. All right. Mr. Kasakian, if you would take us to the next item, please.
Next item is Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services and Development Services regarding proposed renovation of Griffith Manor Park. At 2A is a council motion approving the concept master plan for the renovation of Griffith Manor Park and authorizing staff to proceed with the design development phase of plan development.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chapchin.
All right. Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council, thank you very much. Good afternoon. We are here before you today to talk about Griffith Manor Park and to present the concept plan for Griffith Manor Park. And this is based on 3 community meetings with the community out there, including some business members. Recently, I found out that there may be a little bit of controversy in terms of the parking lot and the basketball court, but we'll let the project managers talk about that. This is one of our older parks in the western part of the city, bought in 1937. It's a 3-acre site, and the last renovation was in the early 1970s, so it really is in need of some renovation work. There is money in it through GRA, and with that, I'd like to call up Dave Ahern, the capital projects manager, and I think he's going to call up Pat Hirsch from Hirsch Associates to go over the concept plan. Dave?
All right. Mr. Ahern, you don't happen to have a PowerPoint concealed upon you at some point?
It does. Mayor Draymond, members of the council, actually, we have a couple of slides for you, just for purposes. Perhaps a few.
Okay. Can I inquire of you about how long you think this presentation is?
We're looking at.
I'd like to get to the public as soon as I can.
Sure. We're looking at 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Closer to 2.
2 to 5.
If we can get the slide up, we'll show you the site plan. And
That's more than 100% increase.
All right.
Mayor Draymond, members of the council, the project before you today is the proposed concept plan for Griffith Manor Park. Staff has had 3 community meetings on this project. The proposed design represents the input from those community meetings. By and large, the community has been very supportive of the project. We've done a lot of outreach. Yesterday, we were, however, contacted by business owners adjacent to the project expressing their concern about parking issues. All of these businesses and residents had been notified of the community meetings previously. Not all were able to attend. We've spoken with them since that time. So we are on a fast track with the project schedule. The rendering shows the existing design and the proposed design. Project architect is here to talk to you about design features of the project. Staff is available to answer any questions you may have. That concludes my presentation.
All right.
Wow.
Wait.
That was quick.
Where's the basketball court?
It's coming. I'm sorry.
It was the wrong slide, Mr.
Oh, I
Yusufi, and they're bringing that. Let us give...
Technical difficulties?
Wrong one.
Okay.
1 second.
Tell you what.
What are you looking for?
Why don't we can send up another slide while the public's commenting, and if you'd like to see it, we can bring it up.
I'm very anxious to see yet another slide. Is it in our packet, by the way, Mr.
It is.
It is.
So
Well,
That's what I'm...
it's the same ones that are in our report.
It is. We just put it on the screen for the public and for
So
television.
this is the proposal.
That's correct. You have the correct
All right. So that
design.
Okay.
That's not changed.
All right. Let us, if my colleagues are ready, let's go to the public and hear the input. And then perhaps they'll have the slide for the folks at home to see. All right. Would that be a yes?
Yes.
No objection. Okay. All right. Our first speaker is Joanne Hedge, followed by Herbert Milano.
Good afternoon, Mayor Draymond, council, agency, and staff, and visitors. I am a 14-year resident of the Glendale Rancho, and this particular park, Griffith Manor Park, serves the greater Riverside Rancho neighborhood. And as you know, it's very old. It is in dire need of upgrading, and that kind of goes without saying. I like the idea of its being linked to the eventual restoration of the historic Grand Central Airport nearby. There is a kind of a mutual benefit there as an amenity for youth and children and families. I think most of the access to this park is on foot. It's pedestrian, cyclists, skateboarders, and whatnot. There is parking for 16 and some street parking, and I understand some of the businessmen are concerned about parking. And the fact that this park is an oasis, really, of green and softness in the middle of a vast industrial corridor, and that it's adjacent to the Walt Disney Companies, which, as we know, were founded on the whole purpose of entertaining and involving children. I think this park and its upgrades are very appropriate, and the fact that it is walking distance to homes nearby is important. You can't always expect these families to get all the way over to Griffith Park or other more distant parks. I like the plan, the concept plan, the fact that they're going to be using permeable concrete where necessary, and they're observing the necessity of the trend toward saving runoff water and using your irrigation purposes in that way. And the fact that so far there was a failure to go ahead and implement the nearby Franklin Elementary School as a shared recreational after hours, and it's all asphalt anyway without any green, so that makes the importance and role of this park and its upgrading even more important. So we really urge you to approve of this, going ahead on this particular master plan for this area, which has a great need for this facility. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hedge. Herbert Milano, followed by Mike Mohill.
Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council, my name is Herbert Milano. I want to congratulate the city management and the Parks and Recreation for what I consider an outstanding design for an area that has such a great need for this type of facility. A while back, I took a tour of all of the city parks, and of course, even the depiction of the current situation actually is not quite accurate, because the upper on the far left north side is really without development, or at least the last time I checked. Now, this particular design, facilitating a basketball court up at the very front, I think is an outstanding idea. The way it's laid out for families to have some privacy towards the back, the open spaces that are available, the area for lots. I mean, if the council moves forward with this thing, I'd love to see this thing without any changes. If the near businessmen have any concerns, I want to say that on weekends this park gets a significant amount of use, and it is precisely when most of these businesses are closed. The fact that these are not necessarily full commercial type establishments, but rather tend to be industrial, there is very little activity on Saturdays and Sundays, allowing a significant amount of parking, if need be, on the streets. I don't believe that there will be much heavy activity during working hours, so that I think that their concerns may be a bit misplaced. The idea of having a basketball court and having that type of middle youth, if I can call it that, teenage usage, I think is absolutely essential. So many of the mini parks that you have promoted in the past few years have left out that middle segment of the population. The mini parks serve, tots under 6 years old, and is useful for individuals who are retired and over 70, but that middle gap is left out, and here is a park that addresses the needs of all of the community, especially an area that has been neglected for a very, very long period of time. It is my hope that you do not delay this project, and it is my hope as well that this thing could be brought to fruition within 12 months. Let's make out of this particular design something that the city rarely does, which is bring a project in on time and under budget and as designed for once. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Mr. Mohill. Mike Mohill, followed by Eunice Baston.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman. reading today's Glendale News Press, and I read about this park, and I was very much impressed with it. 3 acres, and I also concur with the 2 previous speakers, Mr. Milano and the lady before him. And I also am happy to see that the Redevelopment Agency has the money, as said by Mr. Najaran in the paper. And I think nothing's going to be transferred. But, you know, I was reading this paper, not trying to get political, but I'm reading Mr. Yosefian's ad today, and he made a significant interest. He says council meetings in the past were at 2 p.m. until he brought it to the point that it should be at 6 p.m. And then it went to be at night and televised. I'm thinking right now, I've been here all afternoon, and the public is not here. All you have basically is all staff people. I mean, the children for this park should be here saying, I want my park yesterday, not tomorrow. The person who is concerned about the buildings on Colorado Boulevard, the previous section, they should have been here too. But at this time of day, this is like having a closed session. Why can't we have this type of the redevelopment agency, the housing development, all these little agencies, have them done on, like I said, on a Wednesday night so the public can be here? Then we can have more openness and the public will know what's going on, because at 2 o'clock and 2:30 in the afternoon, everybody's working. The only reason I'm here is because I'm retired. I'm still making my $1,200 a month, Mr. Mayor. That's why I can be here.
That's more than the council makes.
I know, I know. So, not trying to get political, okay, but like Mr. Yosefian said in his article here, he says, you know, this is precisely why I firmly believe in my civic duty, and I'm so engaged in my community. For those advocating open government, accountability, and transparency, history will show back in the 1990s, citizen politician who shined the spotlight on City Council's 2 p.m. meeting. I am successfully spearheaded the movement to change the meeting from 6 p.m. for the working folks can be here. And I think it's time that you gentlemen consider having this section of the meeting in the evening so that the residents can come forward, be like me, say praise, say critical, okay? Also the businessmen who are affected by all this going on today. And with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohill. Eunice Baston, followed by Vilma Vera.
Mayor, council member, and staff. I'm here on my own behalf and others that were not able to attend today. I definitely support the Griffith Manor Park Master Plan. When I first saw it, I was really, really excited. I think it's wonderful, whoever did this work, and it is a great improvement to the neighborhood. My husband and I are owners of 2 3-unit properties there in the neighborhood. We've been owner-managers for 40-plus years. And we've had many, many tenants, needless to say, and they do like beautiful parks. This is an important time in our nation where people are trying to save money and expenses, and going to neighborhood parks is one of the ways that they can enjoy parts of the city that don't cost a lot of money. And also it costs less if they will leave their homes in the summer and go down and enjoy this park and spend less on air conditioning and electricity. This area is primarily single-family residences and mostly smaller units. And that's why a neighborhood park is very, very important. This is the only neighborhood park in that entire area over there. So that's why it's so very important. Young people will enjoy riding bikes there. Parents will bring strollers there with their young children. Youth will enjoy it, and the basketball court is going to appeal to teenagers that are not able to be here today. I've heard that you've already received a letter from them requesting this. About 25 teenagers have sent information to you about this. And I agree that it's important to keep the teenagers very busy, and athletics is one of the best things that we can provide for them. From the city's point of view. The principal of Franklin Elementary School was not able to be here today, and she's in support of this, but she's out in Sacramento right now. And the school will use this park as well, and it's always nice to have a park close by. We really need this park to be upgraded. I can think of lovely parks in the north part of Glendale, the central part of Glendale, the south part of Glendale, the east part of Glendale, but this is the west part, and this needs a lot of improvement. It's a tremendous asset to the neighborhood. It will make our neighborhood nicer. It should increase all the property values there, because when you have something like this, it gets a lot of use. There's a lot of industrial area there as well where people can come for lunches. And I remember reading in the census, and I'll finish real quickly. I've been reading in the past about the density and the number of people that will be coming to our area by 2020, and it was a much higher group of people than what we have now in the city. This is city property, and it's for all of the people who live there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Paston. Okay, Vilma Vera, followed by Rick Barnes.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Vilma Vera, and I guess you should just say whatever I was came to say. The only thing that I can say is that all the neighbors around that side of Glendale, they're all very happy, very thrilled about this new project. So we are asking the mayor and the city mayors to approve this master plan, because the way it is being designed, it meets the needs of these families with the small children and teenagers. Why teenagers? Because they need, like Juna said, they need to be busy doing something positive in their life. We don't want more gang members, so that's going to be more expenses on the city. That's why it's better to keep them busy. And I'm here to support the basketball court, because the teenagers, they're the one asking for that. Because right now, what they do, they have to break into Franklin School, then they get cited, and then they get tickets. And I don't think that's fair. As a mother, I don't think that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vera. Okay, Rick Barnes, followed by Ara Kirkchin.
Happy Valentine. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm still in February. Mayor, City Council, City staff. My interest in this property is that I've been managing property, one across from where the basketball court's going to be on Roberta Street, and one at the end of the property on Roberta Street, and then three more across from where the park is now. What we've seen is that we're really for this project, by the way. We're happy about it. We see a lot of people, I'm over there quite often by the park, and also from some of the Disney people I work with, that they use this park every day for lunches. They walk there. There's a lot of walking, going to the park. The biggest problem that we still have is that Roberta Street is a very narrow street. There's parking on both sides. There is some residential on that street, probably 3 houses total that are residential. The problem on Roberta is it's not a cul-de-sac street. It's a dead end, and there is no turnaround, and that's one of the problems that we have. And as we see more traffic build up for this park, and when it is cleaned up, when you have the freeway off-ramp and on-ramp coming in off of Western there will be a direct impact on the traffic conditions there. So we're hoping that what you would actually look at doing is add a little bit more parking. The 16 parking spaces there, compared to the 8 that you used to have on the old one, is you see that long driveway. And I got to tell you, over the last 22 years, my children, we would go there from our house because they had different programs at the park, and people would park on the grass. So it's not just 8 parking, it was the fact that they would pull off the side road there and line up their cars so that they could actually access that building in the back. We like the idea that you brought the community center forward. One of our buildings backs up to the very end of your park there, and the thought that we had there is that we already have conditions that occur at night. This park is not an attended park, so when you're having teenagers and others there is nobody to stop some of the activity that could occur there. That's another concern that we have. So it means that we as neighbors will be policing the park for you since you don't have any attendance at that park. Anyway, that's our thought, and we hope that you'll just add parking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barnes. Ara Kirkshin, followed by Jim Ham.
Thank you, Mayor Draymond, council members. My name is Ara Kirkshin. My family and I own some properties on Roberta on both sides of the street. And we've owned it since 1995. And frankly, we spend more time there than we do at home. And we see everything that's going on there. We applaud the responsible personnel of the city for the wonderful design they've come up over here. As Rick mentioned, there are few concerns. A, the new ramp going in is going to bring new point of meeting to the public, where they can come over there and meet. Especially being basketball, kids going to come over there and congregate and play basketball, and it is 16 parking spaces is not enough. And I just found out that if the assembly area over there in the recreation room is 750 square feet, it needs 50 parking spaces. If it is 1,500 square feet, it needs 100 parking spaces. So that's per code. So that's way under park if the private entity was going to go out there and put an assembly room like this. And the other characteristic that this neighborhood has, it's primarily industrial. And a lot of the homes there, they are legal non-conforming, and they are on M2 properties, a lot of single families, which eventually might be converted into industrial properties. And this is unlike other parks in the city. It's not within walking distance of homes, unlike Nibley Park, Pelanconi, Brand Park, and etc. People often get there by cars. On weekends, it's fully parked. Weekends, we have parking problems the way it is, and we get there at 7:30, 8 o'clock. And as Rick mentioned, sometimes they're parked along the driveway over there on grass. And in short, we're supportive of this project, but somehow we have to either do something as basketball court, move it, reduce the size, make it half basketball court, and increase parking spaces. And last but not least, when we get there, oftentimes in the mornings, we have to sweep condoms from there in the dark parts of the street, even though our buildings are fully lit. And this may bring, even though it's going to be fully locked up park, but people might stay after hours and do whatever they want to do. And we don't want to be collecting more junk of people or the paraphernalia that stay after hours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kirkshin. Our last speaker is Jim Ham.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Ham, and like Ara, I represent a family that owns property on 1600 Flower Street. We've been there since 1971. We're just a little bit ways down from the park, just across the street on the south side. I share Ara's concern about the parking. I think it's a wonderful plan. I love the plan. It's very well executed. But I think we're just mainly concerned about all the parking that is going on and the new building, the public building, when people would be congregating there for their events and how that would affect things. Not shown on this plan, and I get it's not an agenda item today, but the street, the new construction on Flower Street. We are on the corner of Justin and Flower, and there's a lot of children, I think, that come from a school under the freeway there. They come through and they walk through that area on Justin Street, and they cross at that point. And I haven't been privy to recently to the street plans, but I believe that there's going to be an island that would block the crossing there, and that might be a concern to take into account on this. So all in all, I mean, I love the plan. I think it's a great addition. I do have a question for these gentlemen here. On the right or left side there, it looks like you have indicated that the existing chain link fence is going to be left as is, and I'd just like to know if that's still the case, and how that then interfaces with the old Singer Libroscope building that, the area that Disney owns now. That's right in front of my building. I don't know if this is the time and place, but I'd like to know eventually, what that whole thing looks like. If there's going to be a fence, or is it going to continue with chain link and open dirt as I'm seeing now? So,
okay, Mr.
Thank you very much.
We'll get you an answer to your question. All right, Mr. Chapchin. Regarding the parking issues raised by Messrs. Barnes, Kirkjian, and Ham, and Mr. Ham's other concern about the chain link fence, can you address those?
Yes, I believe we're going to keep the chain link fence, but it will be a new fence. We're not sure what's going to happen on the Disney side. They may build a wall there. It wouldn't make sense right now to build a wall. We want to see what happens there first before we commit to what we're going to put on the Disney side.
Right.
Regarding the parking, are you talking about the additional parking?
The concern that there's insufficient parking, I think.
Let me just say, in the old plan, we had two buildings there. The one building on the right, and the other one on the left that we demolished because of the conditions of the building. And together, those are about 4,500 to 4,700 square feet. So this is actually a reduction in the size of the building. We think it's adequate for parking. One of the reasons why people do park in there right now is it's not locked. There's access. You can just drive right in, and so they do park sometimes on and along that road that leads up to the parking area that has currently 8 parking spaces. So we have doubled the parking spaces from 8 to 16. We feel right now it's adequate. We can always go back and take a look at and see if we need more, but right now that building, the new current building, is smaller in footprint than the other 2 buildings when we had it programmed.
So I guess the question then is, if that area becomes locked up, where will those vehicles go?
If right now the vehicles in the new plan would only park in the parking lot and their street parking in the new plan, they wouldn't be able to access the park inside with their vehicles.
So, in essence, out in the neighborhood.
Well, when the park is open, they have access to the parking lot and the streets. Yes. But people do walk to this park. Weekends it is very busy, and some people do drive. There is a neighborhood. They walk through the tunnel underneath the freeway. So they do come in from the Franklin Elementary School area. So they do walk to this.
All right. Mr. Weaver?
George, where it's a bump out, but it's not a bump out because we're widening Flower. All that hatched area is unavailable for angle parking?
It is.
Because I don't know where...
It's available for parking, parallel parking right now. There's about 10 spaces available for parallel parking right now.
Is it deep enough that you can get parallel parking? I mean, angle parking.
Yeah, I think so. We should take a look at it just based on how the traffic's coming in and the widening of the street and what that does, but we'll work with...
The traffic lane is 8, 10 feet max. Maybe it means pulling parking in a foot or two, but if you can get angle parking, you might greatly increase the number.
Sure.
And of course, over on Roberta, there's a driveway there in red curbing a long distance up. That's all remove the driveway, whatever, you'll gain, 3 or 4 more parking spaces on Roberta at Flower too.
Certainly can take a look at angled parking over there on Flower.
I bet you could double the number compared to parallel.
If we can get it in safely, based on what traffic and engineering.
Have to push. What's a foot or two if you can get the parking?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Najjar? Mr. Quintero?
Well, I am very, very, very happy that we're here and going to make this decision because, like some of the speakers mentioned, boys, this area need this park. We used to have meetings there, I don't know if it was in the 70s or 80s when it was, but long ago it was a more active use for neighbors and for some of the business people that are situated in this corridor. But it's basically fallen into zero use and gang activity, and this will make all the difference in the world. So I'm very, very interested in moving forward as soon as possible. And I do think it's a good idea if we can get some angled parking in there, parallel or angle, but whatever. If we can if we can get some angled parking in there, that'll certainly boost the amount of parking spaces that'll be available, not only for the park, but to the general neighborhood. And I do think that an awful lot of families, at least on the weekends, families walk there and kids walk to this park. So all in all, I think it's going to be a good neighbor. It's certainly going to increase property values for everyone, multifamily residences as well as some of the industrial uses. So let's get going on it and get it built soon. This neighborhood deserves it, that's for sure.
Okay. We'll go to Mr. Yusefian in 1 second. Mr. Weaver, you had another question?
I was just going to say, it looks like we've created an attractive nuisance. It'll draw more cars, but what are you going to do?
I actually have one more comment, and that is that I think we have to absolutely work in some pedestrian safety improvement from the get-go, because otherwise I think the use is going to increase. There will be a lot of pedestrians crossing Flower, so we better get that going.
We're very cognizant of that, and we're working with traffic and engineering.
A lot of people coming off the Interstate 5, and they're headed for work.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to note also, this will be a park that will be locked up at night. Currently, it isn't, and there's plenty of opportunities for people to hide behind the buildings and do whatever, unsavory activities and spill out onto the neighborhood. But I think if we close it, maybe even at dusk when it does turn dark, may not be a need for anybody to be in there. It just kind of clears people out earlier.
Mr. Mayor, does Roberta,
we'd have to come back with
Roberta have street lighting, or is it dark? No lighting. Might talk to our lighting department and see what it would cost to put a couple street lights in there.
All right. Mr. Yusefian.
In the plan, it says number 32, 8-foot-high masonry wall. I guess it is going the whole length of all the buildings. Is that what it is?
No, come on, Pat.
I'm Pat Hirsch of Hirsch Associates, landscape architect, designer of the project. No, that would just go basically, I can get a cursor up here. Oh, here we go. That would basically just run the length right here. There's a building that backs up to the park here, so we don't need it, and it would start here and go to about here, because these these are two residents in here, and they sit back off the property. Mm-hmm. And the problem they've been having is right now the building sits right in here. The building's right here. People live back here at night. You can see the homeless. They have their stuff stashed up in the trees. When the police come to roust them, if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing and the neighbors call, the police come to roust them, they jump over the wall, climb on the roof, and run away. So that was the thinking, is to put a masonry wall here, 8 foot high. It could be an 8 foot high chain link fence. The suggestion at the community is an 8 foot high wall. So that's basically where that runs. It's just this small distance right here.
Okay, it doesn't go the full length then?
No, it doesn't really need to, because from about this location all the way down is already fenced. And the building's back up, so you have a masonry building wall that's 22 feet high.
Okay, and the fencing is masonry wall?
That's what we're proposing.
Okay, the only reason I asked that is I wanted to make sure you grow something on it so it does not become a nice little surface for the taggers to go out there and tag things. So you may want to grow something on the face of that wall.
Yes.
Some kind of a greenery, so it doesn't...
Vine type of thing, yeah.
So it does not become a tagging location for that. The other thing is the blue is shown in here to be a new splash pad.
This area right here,
okay, what is that? Is just like Pacific Edison? We got a little bit of a rubberized material and some water coming out?
Yeah, you have a post, and you hit the post, and a couple of nozzles turn on, and you just get the toddlers wet and the kids wet, in the hot summertime.
So it's not a shallow pool or anything?
Oh, no.
It's
it's called zero water.
Zero water. Okay, sounds good.
Zero depth.
Okay, that sounds fine. I'm assuming that this is our preliminary plan, and then you're coming back with a full-fledged design, or this is it?
This is it. We're going to work off this design.
This is it? Okay. Because the furniture and all the stuff, because we have talked about it in the past, when would you come back with that? You will be coming back with that?
Yes, we'll be coming back with those design elements at a later date. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. As for myself, I'm fine with this. I think it's a good plan. I like the design. And there was a speaker who talked about there was a failure on Franklin Elementary's yard, that there was a failure and we were not able to do the greening. I want to make that correction that the failure wasn't on behest of the council or the school district. Both organizations were willing to go there and green that the playground. The neighbors around the school said, we don't want it. So I just want to make that very clear. It was not a failure on behest of all of us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Chapman.
Mayor Jerman, if I may ask Pat just to clarify the block wall again and the 26, what did you say, 26 feet?
Yeah, they're about 26 feet high.
And those are walls from the buildings?
Right. The walls from the buildings, you have an existing building right here that has a wall right on the property line. You have another building that has a wall on the property line. Then you have a fence in here, so the mason, and then you have another building with the wall right on the property line. These buildings are 22 to 26 feet high, poured in place concrete walls, so to speak. So our masonry wall would run basically from here to here.
Right, so you're filling the gap.
And that's
filling the gap.
And that's to the rear of the two residents that are there?
Correct.
And how tall will that wall be?
8 feet.
8 feet, okay.
The residences will be happy too.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from or questions from council? All right. Thank you very much.
Mayor, I'll move 2A.
All right. We have a motion and a second on 2A. Any other input or comment? No? Mr. Kasakian, could you call the roll?
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Montero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. Okay. Thank
Move
you.
to adjourn for council.
Second.
Council is adjourned.
Move to adjourn for redevelopment agency.
Second.
Agencies adjourned.
Thank you.